And when you're ready, you can just open your eyes and just, wow, that was a good one, everyone. I hope you felt it. It's quite normal sometimes to feel waves of emotion, maybe tears, sadness mixed with joy, mixed with love, mixed with compassion, mixed with hope, right? As we feel our own hearts, it's so beautiful to begin to cultivate this like a great gardener out in your garden of your own heart, mind, and to begin to awaken these deeper qualities. So if you need to take a moment to stretch your body or get your tea, we're gonna have a little talk here. If you need to stretch a little bit, I invite you to do so. And it's just so beautiful to see you all tonight as I see all of our friends here practicing. Yay. As always, it's such a beautiful reminder. And as you come to your Heart Medicine Tuesday night, you inspire all of us, right? We see our faces together. We see all hope is not lost in the universe. There are millions of beings cultivating in this very moment, doing this practice, right? Under the earth, in the ground, in the temples, and, all over there are people. Let us not lose hope in that. I have to say, at the end of the story here, love always prevails. Look at any fairy tale, that's in our mythology. It's weaved together in the fabric of this reality. Nothing built on greed, hatred, and delusion can ever last. It's against the universal laws. It's temporary. And so we always have to remind ourselves over and over that there's great power in this heart. And the more you keep taking the medicine in of the metta practice, which for me, it's such a medicine. It's such a reminder. It puts us in another frequency, does it not? Sometimes on Tuesday nights, you might feel heavy or like, oh, I don't know if I want to go. I don't want to. And then you do, and you're like, oh yeah. It feels like the sense of rejuvenation, right? As we bask in that energy of metta, we shine this light on ourselves. And then when we amplify it, it brings a tremendous sense of spiritual nutrients and nourishment back into our practice, into the moment. And that gives us this resiliency, right? The resiliency to keep opening. And that's so much of our work right now, is to keep softening and opening. And it seems so counterintuitive, right? Where it's like, open, open to this, open to the madness of, everything. And yes, that is somehow the deeper message, is like to not shut down and harden and brace off from humanity, but to keep, it's like unfolding, opening, holding. In some ways, this is the great mother. The heart represents often feminine energy, but it's beyond gender. Feminine energy has nothing to do with the body you have. That's what's so funny about all these arguments right now. And that's like, everyone's missing the point. These are collective archetypal energies. They appear in forms that are quite beautiful, by the masculine or feminine, but the heart, it represents the great mother energy, the divine mother, right? The mother sometimes we didn't get, but we have access to in the great mother, Maha, right? Madre, Pachamama, right? This giver of life. It's so interesting in the Buddhist tradition. So many of the root texts are called the Mother Sutras, right? The Mother Sutras is like, it gives birth to all the other sutras. They call it the Maha Mother, or they call it the Prajnaparamita Suttas. Prajnaparamita is the mother of the Buddhas. Often she's depicted naked, very shamanic, holding, her hands in this wisdom pose. She gives birth to the awakened consciousness. And what this symbolizes right now is that the heart gives birth to wisdom. That without the heart, you cannot awaken, right? The mind will never let go of the ego. It will never let go of the concepts. It will never let go of the distorted ideas that obscure its natural radiance. It's compassion. It's the mother. It's the heart that gives birth to that. And I've been thinking so much about this as I have been having all of these visions and connections to Tara. In the Buddhist tradition, Tara is the female Buddha. She awakened in the feminine body. And so within all this oppression of the feminine and all this, degradation, it's no wonder the earth is barely holding on. And so as we come into this alignment, the feminine begins and the masculine qualities, they find their balance. It's not one overpowers the other. It's that harmony of that yin yang symbol, right? I love that universal symbol of balance, right? And everything finds its natural place. But there's a very important story that I've been contemplating. And as many of you know, I'm writing this third book of mine, which I keep feeling so inspired from. And it's called The Flame That Remembers, the Sutta of the Returning Light. And so much of this light is this return of the heart, this awakening and the compassion, the ability, this interconnectedness, right? This idea that we are shifting from this industrial growth society built on greed as a foundation. And we're shifting. And this is what is so painful about this time is like a whole cycle it's shifting into this life sustaining. We go from the I consciousness into the we consciousness, right? May we all have what we need. May we all, it becomes naturally abundant when we think about that, right? We think about the collective, right? Because the mother thinks about everyone, right? Not just one person. Like the mother is like nourishes the whole entire family. So we take on these qualities of the grandmother and the mother, and they express through the masculine in beautiful ways, incredible ways. It meets that energy and it becomes the Heavenly Father, right? We meet these energies in ourselves and we're discovering all of this now, this great shift that's been prophesied for thousands of years, the Mayan prophecy, the Hopi prophecies, it's the end of the Kali Yuga. As I've been talking to some of my Hindu friends and they were like, the Kali Yuga is like the end of a great cycle. And we're in the last phases of a great cycle before this begins to turn. And this is a way for us to hold it. But as we are practitioners, we are coming back into understanding what is the great heart? How am I connected to that great heart? But there was this story that I was reflecting on about this balancing, and it's the Buddha's own story of his own balance. And many years ago, I went on a pilgrimage to India. And I visited a holy site near Bodh Gaya, where it's the Buddha's tree of enlightenment. And I went to a beautiful temple. Well, I wouldn't say beautiful. It was beautiful energetically, but like all things in India, it's been around for a while, right? And it was Sujata's village. And in the story of Prince Siddhartha, which I think that as I write about the Sutta of the Returning Light, I want to hone in the goddess Sujata and her story in relationship to the masculine and this awakened heart. And again, masculine energy, I just use these terms, but they're so much bigger than bodies. We have to get out of this fixation of that. It makes no sense. Plants come in all genders. Like mythology is filled with all kinds of imagery. And it's just it's just I just want to encourage people to go beyond what it is to have a physical body. There are many manifestations of spirits. We're in one small, one small place on the earth. We're in a 10,000 world system of infinite manifestations of energy. And so masculine and feminine is just that dance. It's like the sun dancing with the moon, you know? And so the story of Siddhartha was that when Siddhartha was a prince and he left the palace to seek enlightenment, he went on what they called the hard years when he ordained himself on the river, the Narayana River in northern India. His life as a prince died, right? And he became a seeker of truth. Why is this world so full of suffering? He sought deeply the answers to suffering. Why is this so hard? Why are beings in this state of suffering, unending, never-ending cycles of pain and illness and confusion? So as he wandered in the forest, he sat with many great masters, but none could answer that deeper question. And so he began to sit in that time. There was a lot of seekers in the forest. This is when India, 2,500 years ago, they had like a golden era of awakening that lasted maybe 1,500 years. And during this time, he began to practice with a group of very aesthetic practitioners. And he thought, if I break the body, my connection to the body, my spirit will soar. And he began to do a lot of very intense practices, almost to the brink of body mortification, right? They say for a year, he lived on 1 grain of rice a day. Right? Not bathing, not, believing that if I go beyond this body, that I will liberate. And they said that while he was practicing, there was this period where he was very, very close to dying. He was close to killing himself because he was really starving the body of what it needed. And there's in the sutras, they go, all of these gods up in the heaven realm are going, oh no, he's missing it. He's missing his opportunity. Why is he doing this? Right? And they were all like, oh, maybe this opportunity for this great teacher to be here, he's missing it. He's going too extreme. This is not in balance, right? And so they were crying and weeping, thinking any moment his body will pass and his opportunity to be a great heart on this planet, to teach these practices of love and compassion and mindfulness and awareness, like the opportunity is lost, and how sad. And then, so that day, Siddhartha had got up in the morning and his body, what they said, was so weak and emaciated. There's a lot of statues in India where they have images of the Buddha when he was in this emaciated form. Literally, he was just a bag of bones. They describe this horrific images, like sunken eyes, just ribs, no fat left on his body. He stood up and he fell down in the mud. So looks like quite a mess. He just fell in the mud and couldn't get up, did not even have the energy to get up. Well, the story now becomes very important about Sujata. So unbeknownst to him, out about a mile away from where he was practicing, this beautiful awakened woman named Sujata, she decided she was going to make a whole bunch of offerings at this beautiful temple. So as we know in other traditions, offerings of beautiful lights and flowers and candles and food are often put out on special days to offer to the spirit world, to the gurus, to the ancestors. So she spent hours and hours milking a cow, churning it into sweet cream, making this rice porridge. They said she labored for maybe 6-7 hours, adding in all the fragrance and all the spices. So she had this ginormous bowl of the most delicious rice porridge. And she goes, okay, now I'm going to walk through the forest. And she's carrying all her offerings and was going to put out the offering plate. And as she's walking, lo and behold, she looks down and sees this mangled man, barely breathing, barely alive. She sees his mangled hair. They have descriptions where the Buddha did not comb or grow his hair. It's just tangles, right? And he was covered in mud and near death. And she sees this mangled heap of bones on the ground, and her heart soars as she sees this being near death. And so she walks over to this being and goes, "Oh my God," right? And she pulls him out of the mud, and she has this enormous bowl of food, and she just starts offering the food, right? Offering the food, offering the food. And by that time, he's so near death, he realized that he had been practicing all wrong. So he actually allows himself to receive the support. Right. And then they say as the day went on, she not only fed him this giant bowl of porridge, rice pudding porridge, but also took him to the river and bathed him and blessed him and was helping him. And there's this beautiful story about that, and how after that period of time, he saw that he was practicing in this unsustainable way that was not balanced. And Sujata represents the great heart, the great mother, right? Your mother is like, it depicts, what does your mother offer you? The first thing out of her body is food and nourishment, right? Then your very first breath, she's already feeding you, right? Trying to give you life. That is the energy of the great mother. That is the compassion. And so Sujata is a powerful force because she represents that compassion coming in. He was practicing in a way that was powerful but diluted. It didn't have the balance of the heart. And he realized that as he was with her, like, oh my gosh, I've been destroying my body, thinking that that was the way, practicing in a way that was so unsustainable, even harmful to myself. And so at that moment, he decided to change everything about his practice. They say that there are these other ascetics. He was practicing with these other 5 practitioners, and they saw him eating rice in the river with this beautiful woman, and they all go, "Oh no, you've gone off the path." And he was like, no, this is good. We have to find this balance. But again, the idea that anything could come from the compassion, that one can even become deluded in their own spiritual practice if they're devoid of love and compassion. Like the heart has to be there. And Sujata for me was always a very powerful part of the story. Over the years, they tried to erase Sujata out, making her very young in age, creating like, it's kind of like they write out the Gospels of Mary, right? And they minimize any impact that the great mother has on these awakened beings, right? They discounted the mother's aunt and his princess, and there was thousands of beautiful things that he learned. But Sujata, in Thich Nhat Hanh's version of the story, which I was researching, they say that Sujata stayed with Prince Siddhartha for 6 weeks, feeding him every day, helping him regain his power, nursing him, and even a version of the story where they become lovers for a period of time. And then from there, once he regains his health, he goes, okay, I'm ready to practice in a balanced way. And he sits under the Bodhi tree. And then there's this great awakening, right? With this balance of love and awareness, being in harmony. So I say this because I'm still, as a practitioner who studies these great texts, and who looks to the past, the lineages, the great lineages of Krishna and the great lineages of all of these masters, including Siddhartha, it's important that we're renewing our interest in the aspect of love. And of course, the Buddha taught the heart practices for the rest of his life. And the metta practice was given out to a group of monks who were terrified and being scared by these mischievous tree spirits under where they were practicing. But of course, the story, they conquered. So I had always had this fascination with Sujata and this love of Sujata for her stepping in as that mother archetypal figure, that healer, the divine feminine, this balancing of the mother, the masculine, the feminine, and this representation of the heart, this nourishment of compassion. Like, don't destroy yourself. Without her help, he could have possibly passed away that day, but she sort of rescued him. And that's a powerful storyline. And so when I went to India, I was like, we got to go to Sujata's village. So we caught this moto taxi way out, right? And we're on this road, and then we were like, okay, here's where Sujata's village. We actually went to the original village. And then there was this huge, like, there was a series of statues which showed Sujata with this great bowl of rice porridge and the Buddha all mangled and her feeding him. And they had turned her village into an orphanage. So when I was there were so many children. And so I remember we went and got food and made offerings, not only to the altar, but to the Great Mother. And that this orphanage, for a period, I went and supported them while I was there. I made all these donations and food offerings in the spirit of Sujata. And I say this story tonight because so much of us is like returning to that spirit of the Great Mother, the great heart. And there's so many acts of compassion that arise out of this love in heart, right? Sujata didn't have to be told what to do. She saw this mangled man and went, she could have walked by like so many people and went, well, I'm going to make this offering. But this tremendous love, like, oh my God, this being is all mangled up in the mud. They said he was in such a bad state, almost unrecognizable, not even looking human, right? Just covered and dirt and mangled and just completely out of balance. So I find that this is where we are in our society right now, right? It's like this great heart that all of us, it connects to the mother, the Great Mother in all of us. And so this is an important moment to recognize that, we always say, Father Sky, Mother Earth. They work in this great union, right? Wisdom balanced with compassion. The sun shines on all of life. Without the sun, that represents often in the Amazonian tradition and the Andean tradition, the sun represents father and the moon represents mother. Right? And the mother controls the moon controls all of the oceans and the tides and, this luminosity of light, and everything works in harmony, right? There's this harmonics to it. And so I say this because we're all finding this balance, but right now the heart is not imbalanced. Right? It kind of feels like things are, right? Something is dying, and this mother energy, the great wisdom of the heart, we have to practice it, activate it. So there's a beauty to this metta practice. At times it can feel like the hardest thing in the world. And at other times it can just flow. And no matter if it's hard or rough or painful, we just keep remembering into offering it up. May my heart open so that I can be a benefit, right? Not only did Sujata, she nourished this mangled man, but then he went on to provide, 2,500 years later, we're still practicing, right? We're still awakening. The wisdom channels are still flowing. The temple bells are still ringing, right? All this time later. And so I just want to encourage us to consider your prayers to the Great Mother as being very powerful right now. We're evoking this balancing of the feminine. And so many of us are feeling visions of Tara, the Buddha in the feminine form. And I'll be giving a series of talks on Tara, the spirit of Tara. Where did Tara's consciousness come from? How did it appear in our consciousness, right? And some of these stories of some of these incredible feminine practitioners. Over the summer, I sort of dedicate to the Great Mother, the wisdom channels carried through the feminine, through the heart chakra. So we give thanks to Sujata and her blessings, and maybe receive the nourishment of Sujata's rice right now for our own heart. Sometimes they always reenact it. They would do at her village, they would reenact the festival where people would be laying down, and then everyone would be taking some of the rice poured and make huge amounts and kind of reenact the nourishment of the love of the Great Mother. And what a beautiful image that is, especially if you didn't have a mother who nourished you. We have to take refuge in the Great Mother that is here through this time. And the more we feel into that, she awakens through our own hearts. We awaken her. We summon the Great Mother. And I keep calling on her like, Great Mother, please help us right now get through this birth canal, which seems like there's so much violence in the children are crying out all over the world, right? Protect us, nurture us, get us through. And so the heart naturally calls on that. And so I just wanted to offer that story a little bit as I was very inspired thinking about the return of the light of the Great Mother and her place in the sky, not as overpowering, but as this harmony of balance between energies, right? The sun and the moon, the heart and the mind, the eagle, the condor. All of these are representations of this balancing time. So on that note, I would just want to see if anyone had anything to share before we go. And how does that land for you? And maybe what we can do is if Baba, I see you have some technology there, but I wanted to see if you wanted to say anything. Oh, we do have, let's go to Deborah. Hi. Speaking of a great mother.
Thank you, Spring. Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate, that the whole story and the whole balance of the masculine and feminine. And literally, like, I don't know, this is how it always happens, right? This is synchronicity because I
Whoops, yeah, there
okay,
you go.
okay. I think like about 40 minutes before we met, I messaged my mom something, and of course she doesn't really ever respond with anything other than okay. And I was like, and I came to this realization that I'm just gonna have to accept things the
Mm.
way they are. And I go back and forth all the time thinking maybe it's gonna be different, and then going back to accepting and stuff, and then you gave this talk. So thank you.
Oh, yes, I understand. Having had a lot of us have mother challenges that are very deep, but
Mhm.
there's another mother. It reminds me very much of Paramahansa Yogananda. When his mother died, his whole life was dedicated to the Great Mother. Yogananda being the author of autobiography of a yogi, and that we can surrender into the Great Mother. My mother has broken my heart. I cannot tell you how many times. We're always rebuilding, but now we can rely on this Great Mother. There's another mother. There's a more expansive, one that can meet our needs in the heart center. But our heart has to open to her, through us. So Thank you, Deborah. So good always to see you. I'm glad this message was right on time. And I know you're at work right now in the hospital, which
Yeah.
also takes a lot of heart, caring for others. Um,
Thank-
this
Yeah.
and does anyone else have anything they would like to share before we begin to close out our session? Barbara, were you able to get your technology up so you can maybe ring the bell for the great mother for us?
I'm going to give a pronoun to the great mother. And yes, there's always a backup plan with the technology. So this is the glamour shot of the room. So there you go.
It looks divine. I love it.
Yes.
And with that being said, everybody, thank you for coming and practicing. That's my message this week for when the times are down. Call on that great mother, chant Tara, call on Mother Mary, whatever it gives you that energy to keep going. Thank you all for your donations for the class as well and all your generosity. And also, know that I have retreats coming up. I have a women's retreat coming up where we're going to dive deep into this at Big Bear. That's in October. We also have another medicine of the heart retreat, which we had this amazing retreat. Oh my gosh, in May. And we're going to have another one in November again, really working with the great mother and Metta. And also, we work with sacred medicine. So you can also find that through Lotus Vine Journeys. I also have a BIPOC retreat coming up in North Carolina. So we're going to do a Harriet Tubman theme retreat there for communities of color. And that will be in September. So I have lots of activities coming up. Check my website and we'll be sharing more. But the main thing, everyone, is this is our heart medicine time. Practice, 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 practice every day. Practice when you can before you go to bed. Take a period every day where you just put your hands on your heart. And when you run out of metta, that's when you call on Sujata, call on the great mother. And that gives us another way to borrow energy. The deities and the goddesses are happy to give it. All you have to do is ask, right? So, on that note, everyone, we will say goodbye. But please, let's turn off our Zoom, our microphones, and then